Part 19. After dressing up as the evil girl in the second game, I opened my eyes and found myself in the Sure. Author, Mei Guicheng. Chapter 182. What does it mean that the character cannot pop up? Does this mean the system recognizes her as an alien bug game character, not an NPC? So what does it mean if her character is cleared? Will the character disappear? Or was his soul thrown back and the original owner Cira was replaced by an NPC again? If the latter one, does that mean that her thinking has been in the wrong place all this time? On the first day she traveled back in time, she just wanted to survive. If she changed the direction, death would mean the game was over. Can she go home? Luoxied stopped the bleeding on Cira's back, arched his tail, and moved out of the bathtub. He moved out of the bathroom in a fish-tailed and semi-standing posture, holding someone like a snake, and a large bath towel enveloped Cira's entire body. She was gently placed on the soft bed. After cleaning his tail, Rockside spread his legs again, put on a bathrobe casually, and came to her side to help wipe her hair. The towel covered most of Cira's face, and the hair that was constantly being stirred by her fingers stuck to her face from time to time. After it was semi-dried, Lucid leaned down and held her face with his hands, preparing to give her something to take internally. Sierra spoke subconsciously, "I'm going to find Eric." Luoxide's evil and beautiful face that was approaching him stopped, his lake blue eyes darkened, and he lowered his tone and said, "He almost killed you, and I won't allow you to touch him." "I'm not dead yet." Cira raised her eyes to look at him, with an indescribable determination in her eyes. "His family will probably be implicated by me. This happened because of me. I have a big responsibility. You're not allowed to go. You just need to be with me. They have nothing to care about." The jealous Luxid held her wrist, pulled her into his arms and hugged her. "I'll change you into some dry clothes, and then we'll sleep together, okay?" The moon that shone in from the window tonight was very full, and the light fell on the instep of her feet. Sierra rested her forehead on his shoulder and slowly shed tears. Eric was discovered to be a werewolf by people from the church, and his tribe might be exterminated. This is just like you almost being captured by those researchers. I would be very worried. She pulled away from his hand little by little. "I have to go." "You love him." Luoxied held her face again. She actually likes them all, and this question is undoubtedly troubling her. But this was not the first time that Sierra had lied. She said calmly, "I only like you, but Eric is my friend and is also very important to me. You can't stop me." Things she believes in can rarely be reversed. Although Luoxied was dissatisfied that she still paid attention to the wolf, it was still within the acceptable range. "Okay, I'll take you there." Sierra's tense nerves relaxed for a moment. She took the initiative to tiptoe and raise her head, and kissed his lips. "Thank you." Luoxied lowered his eyes, his thick eyelashes covered his emotions, and his Adam's apple rolled slowly. "I always hope you can give me a better reward." Cira didn't reply to his words. Of course she understood what he meant. He couldn't do it without saying, "I want to do it with her." Under Luoxied's magical saliva, her wounds healed quickly, but the massive blood loss also made her body very weak. Sierra insisted on going into the mountains late at night, so he carried him into the car. Zachary and Terry sat in the front, one acting as the driver and the other as a bodyguard. When the car arrived halfway up the mountain, something unusual was already discovered. There was a strong smell of blood on the road leading to the tribe, and there were corpses that had been torn apart by wolves in the places illuminated by the car lights. She came very late, they might have finished fighting long ago. After dressing up as the evil girl in the second game, I opened my eyes and found myself in the Sure. Author, Mei Guicheng. Chapter 183. The road further up is very narrow, and when the light shines in, you can only see a lot of moss and dense trees. Luoxied got out of the car and took out Cira, planning to just hold her and walk up. However, the werewolves' noses are very sensitive and they can sense their presence from a long distance. Before Logosied could take a few steps, he assumed a threatened posture, lowered his eyebrows, and said warily, "They are coming." Zachary and Terry also bent slightly, assuming a posture ready to fight. A brown wolf appeared first, its huge head peeking out from behind a thick tree trunk, its eyes shining in the light of the car lights. Sarah heard the sound of animals scraping through the trees, coming from all directions and surrounding them. Their coats were of different shades, and men and women could only be distinguished from each other by their size. She looked around and couldn't find Eric, only remembering that he was a gray wolf with black spots. She pushed Logosied's chest. "I want to come down." "It's not safe." "They are hostile to you," Logosied said cautiously. "It doesn't matter." Sierra was very stubborn. Before, she was actually worried that Eric would take the plot route and kill her for this. But since he took her to Logosied for treatment, she understood that no matter how bad things were, he wouldn't think of it. Kill her. Seeing her stubborn look, Logosied had no choice but to bend down and put the person down. A figure wearing a wide skirt appeared on the upper body, with blood on his hands. "It's Fanny." Ciro licked her lips and asked dryly, "Is the tribe okay?" "Thanks to you, we were discovered by the human church and had to kill them all." Fanny suppressed her anger and stared at her with disappointment and resentment. "Why did you betray Eric and betray us?" "For money." "It's not me," Sierra replied in a deep voice. Seeing that she was still lying, Fanny's raised voice became sharp. "Not you. Only you know the truth. We trust you so much. You are the first time we, for Eric's sake, trusting humans." Sierra was speechless and silent. Who would believe it when she said that Anaxi was responsible for everything? Fanny continued to say angrily, "Did you know that Greenie is injured and bleeding because of you?" She fell hard. "Many of us were injured. Greenie, the only pregnant woman in the tribe, Gail's wife, would be the woman to eat the rabbit's head." Sierra's heart tightened, and she immediately said, "I know what I say is useless, but you can't just let her bleed on the mountain. She must go to the hospital as soon as possible if there is something wrong with the child. If something goes wrong with the child, I will kill you." Fanny quickly followed her words. "No one can hurt you." Luxid hugged Sierra's waist from behind and pressed his chest against her back, giving her the greatest sense of security. "We drove here. It's more convenient to take a car from here to the town. Trust me." Again Sierra lowered her voice, with a hint of pleading in her eyes. "If something goes wrong with Greenie's child, then all the efforts they put into Gail's butcher shop will be in vain, and she doesn't want to see that scene." Several wolves whispered to each other, and they agreed that this was the best way. Although she was wary of Sierra, the injured Greenie could no longer bear the bumps on the wolf's back, and she had to be taken to the hospital smoothly. A wolf returned to the tribe at Fanny's signal. The few people waited in a stalemate for 10 minutes before the humanoid Gale appeared holding the injured Greenie, closely followed by the half-naked Eric. His honey-colored skin was glowing under the car, and there was some blood on his body, but there were no signs of injury. Sierra's heart dropped, but she found that he deliberately avoided her gaze, and even didn't say hello when he passed by. She lowered her eyes and didn't stop him. Psychologically she understood Eric's heart completely. He was the only possible traitor to the wolf tribe. She caused his tribe to be attacked, and caused Greenie to bleed and possibly have a miscarriage. He could not forgive himself for any of this. He might even regret falling in love with her. The car was given to Gale and the others, and Eric also sat in the front seat. When Jim drove the car and turned the corner to go down the mountain, he couldn't help it and looked behind him through the rearview mirror. The pale girl was bent down and picked up by the mareman, half of her face was hidden in his arms, and her emotions could not be seen clearly. Eric clenched his fists, his facial features tense. He was angry at her betrayal, felt sorry for her that she was hurt again, and what was even more shameful was that he was jealous of her lying in the arms of another person who could not even be called a human. Mixed with a variety of emotions, he held his head in the car and groaned in pain. Jem freed his hand and patted him on the back. "We're definitely leaving, Eric." Ciro leaned into Luosied's arms and said softly, "It will take a long time for you to carry me back. Don't you like a walk in the forest?" He didn't completely let down his guard, lowering his head and kissing the top of her hair to express comfort. She chuckled lightly and crawled into his arms. "Do you think I would do such a thing? I betrayed Eric and pushed him and his people into danger." Luxid quickly replied, "I don't care what you did. It doesn't matter to me whether you betrayed the werewolf. This matter alone cannot consume my love for you." He was sarcastically saying that Eric didn't fully trust her. Sierra didn't comment on this. He was just a boy who hadn't even passed his 18th birthday yet. He couldn't hold back and didn't hurt her when encountering this kind of thing, which proved that he was also suffering from inner suffering. I don't know if the wolves were kind-hearted, but they finally helped call a car in and picked up the 4 people. I was asked to come here to pick someone up in the middle of the night. If the other party hadn't given me enough money, I wouldn't have made the extra trip. Sierra thanked her. It was dark inside the carriage, and the driver didn't notice that she was a lady from the Earl's family. When they arrived at the hospital, many nurses were frightened by the attack at the party and went home. There were only a few doctors on duty inside. Fortunately, someone recognized Eric as a soldier in the military camp and helped them arrange an examination for Greenie. Sierra entered the hospital without Luocid, and she needed to talk to Eric alone. The symptoms of excessive blood loss were still there, and she was not walking very steadily. Jim saw her slightly swaying figure first. After some thought, he walked into the ward, called Eric, and handed him the car keys. "Sella is outside and I think she's not in good condition. You go find her and return the car keys to her." Hearing that she was not well, Eric collected the key and walked out of the ward quickly. Sierra stopped when she saw him approaching, until the tall figure was cast by the light and cast a huge shadow, completely covering her. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After dressing up as the evil girl in the second game, I opened my eyes and found myself in the Sure. Author, Mei Guicheng. Chapter 184. Before she could speak, Eric handed her the key in his hand. Granny's child was sent to the hospital in time and the fetus was saved. Sierra exhaled after hearing this. "It's okay." The young man stared at her with lowered eyes, and then said, "When her body stabilizes, we will decide to move." Sierra's breath was suffocated, and her eyes moved slightly hurriedly. "It's because of me." Eric quickly interrupted her. "My identity has been discovered. If you continue to live here, there will be countless troubles. We must create an absolutely safe production condition for Greenie." She lowered her eyes and stared at his leather boots, which were splattered with dark red blood and covered with mud. Finally, Sierra nodded. "I understand, but what are you going to do before that?" Eric replied, "We will continue to live. If the church people come back, they will need preparation time, which is enough for us to leave here." Sierra was silent for a while, raised her head to look at him, took a deep breath. "I understand, then I won't go in to visit Greenie tonight. She may not want to see me either." Having said that, there was no need for her to say anything, so she turned around and prepared to leave. Eric looked at her thin back, and his heart suddenly felt a stab of pain. He covered his chest in pain and dug his fingertips into the flesh. "Sierra," he couldn't help but call her. "Don't you have anything to say to me? Anything else?" Sierra stopped, not knowing how to respond. "I actually got promoted in the military camp and am no longer an inferior soldier." "Why are you?" Eric's tone was sad, but he seemed to be expecting her to give him a good explanation that would convince him. Sierra bit her lower lip hard. As long as she turned back firmly and told him that it was not her fault, even if she just let the slip out of her mouth for a moment, he would definitely relent. But she just wanted to avoid the possibility of being killed, and didn't want to deceive Eric's feelings for the rest of her life. He was so nice that it would be a sin to continue hurting him. He left without any worries, and she also saved her life, which was a result that both parties liked to see. Sierra made a decision quickly. She turned sideways and smiled lightly at him. You can live a good life outside. Find someone else you like. There is no unnecessary explanation, just one heartbreaking sentence. In an instant, something collapsed from Eric's heart. He was stunned and listened to her last apology. What he thought was sorry was that she admitted the truth, but Sierra was just sorry for being so purposefully close to him for so long. When I came out of the hospital, the evening breeze blew on my face and the air was so fresh. Sierra took a deep breath, and before she had time to adjust her emotions, she met Aldine, who came out of the other door. He was holding the box in his hand and saw her first. Sela? Are you injured? Aldine smelled the faint smell of blood, and he subconsciously held his breath and walked towards her. What happened? She walked down the steps and shook her head. It's okay. Why did you come to the hospital? Get some fresh blood, the master hasn't eaten for a long time. Aldine looked her up and down. You are very weak. It seems that he needs to go back and report. It's okay, just a minor injury. She pointed outside. There are still people waiting to take me home. I'll leave first. Aldine let her go sideways, sniffed the air with his nose, and said in disgust, what a strange day, the smell of fish and the smell of wolf are mixed together. After dressing up as the evil girl in the second game, I opened my eyes and found myself in the Sure. Author, Mei Guicheng. Chapter 185. After getting into Rosside's car, he proposed to sleep at his place tonight, but Sierra refused. Send me home, you know I can't stay overnight. She leaned on his shoulder tiredly and said softly, Eric is leaving soon. Luosied curled his lips, with an obvious smile in his tone. Oh? Where is he going to escape? I don't know. It must be somewhere far away. People from the church discovered them. It's too unsafe to stay here. They have no choice. Sierra closed her eyes. When we get to the place, call me. Good. The place where she lived was no longer an elegant manor and a comfortable aristocratic bedroom. Zachary parked the car in front of the villa. Looking at the dead grass in the flower box outside, Luosied didn't like her living in this shabby place, but he still woke her up and said dissatisfied, should I take you back to my place to rest? This place is really shabby. Sierra exhaled and shook her head after regaining consciousness. No, I'll go up there by myself. I'll probably be able to live in a better place when Dad sells the manor. Her lips are still a little white, but that doesn't stop her from kissing the lips of those around her. After a shallow kiss, Sierra sighed, suddenly I feel better. Luxid was pleased by her and touched her tender face with pity. I'll just lie in bed and rest for the next 2 days. Sierra opened the door and entered until the door was locked and her figure appeared in the upstairs bedroom. Only then did Lucid order Zachary to drive away. In the dark house, the servants were already asleep, and there was no movement in Anna 11's bedroom. Sierra stood at the door of her room for a long time before returning to her room to sleep. I don't have the experience to confront her today, she is really tired. Having been cleaned up in Lo Sidna, Ciro lay down on the bed and rolled up the quilt, slowly falling asleep listening to the insects chirping outside the window at night. Later in the night, there was a strange noise from her half-opened window, and she was slowly pushed open. Sierra's eyelashes fluttered slightly, she breathed calmly, and was still sleeping soundly. As usual, Eric left his boots stained with blood and mud outside and quietly came to the bedside. There was a trace of clean soap smell on him, as if he had just taken a shower. Sierra didn't know what he was going to do, and her sleepy body lay there, too lazy to move. After a rustling movement, her quilt was lifted, and her hot body pressed against her without any warning. The firm and tight skin burned her back, and Sierra's heart skipped a beat for a moment, and her hands hidden in the quilt clenched unconsciously. Eric's arms carefully bypassed the wound on her shoulder blade and pulled her into his arms. Even if she couldn't see the current situation, Sierra could still imagine how miserable he felt curling up with her on this small bed. "Does it still hurt?" a hoarse and deep voice pressed against her ear, accompanied by moist breath. Sierra remained motionless and didn't respond. In the bedroom without a trace of light, Eric stared at her peaceful sleeping face. His chest, which had been aching a little, felt much better after seeing her. After a moment of silence, he spoke. "I was never part of your choice." He understood it when she decisively left him a trace of her back and told him to be careful on the road, so his heart has been hurting to this day. Sierra still didn't answer him, she just turned over and curled up her thin body, burying her face in the crook of his neck, fearing that her flaws would be seen. "My people say you betrayed me and failed us all." Eric hugged her and continued to murmur, "I think so too, but my despicable emotions tell me that it wasn't you. Get up and tell me again that you have a reason for what happened, or tell me any of the masterminds, and I will believe you." His voice became softer and softer, and in the end it turned into a bit of pleading. "Okay, Sierra. Don't just admit all your mistakes and leave him without saying anything or defending yourself like you are now." He was so uncomfortable and jealous that he almost wanted to go crazy. Sierra still pretended to sleep in silence. She thought he should know that she was awake, but she couldn't answer. Eric seemed to say a lot more later on, but she didn't hear it very clearly. She was too tired and her ears were buzzing, so she finally slept until dawn. There was no trace of Eric on the bed in the morning, but the quilt wrapped Sierra tightly, and both sides were rolled in deliberately, fearing that she would lift the quilt. Sierra sat up after being dazed for a while and slowly moved her back. Over the past night, the pain from the wound disappeared, and even she did several chest expansion exercises without affecting the strength of the muscles behind her. Seeing that it was still early, she put on her cotton slippers and went to the bathroom to fill a porcelain basin with water. Then she opened the door and entered Anaxi's room, and poured a basin of water on the bed. Ah! Anaxi was still sleeping when a basin of water suddenly poured over her head, causing her to cough non-stop. When she saw who was coming, she got excited and wiped her face and shouted angrily, "Sierra! Are you crazy?" Sierra locked the door, climbed onto the bed and straddled her body. She raised her hand high and aimed at one of Anaxi's cheeks, and slapped her hard. She sneered and said, "You did a great job of informing the people in the church and letting them attack Eric's tribe. What are you saying?" Snapped. Sierra slapped her on the other side of the face again. Josie and the servants who heard the noise outside the door were already in a panic and kept knocking on the door. Josie yelled, "Sierra! What are you doing? Open the door for me." Sierra leaned over Anaxi's red face, waved away the flapping hands, and choked her neck. "What else did your system ask you to do? Want to kill me?" I cough, I don't know. Anaxi was completely panicked, fearing that she would strangle herself to death. "Weren't you given the system to conquer those 3 men and reach the peak of your life? Why are you pretending to me?" Sierra directly showed her cards, and this move successfully made Anaxi stop her flapping movements. She widened her eyes in shock, and said in shock and anger, "I knew you were too. We are in a competitive relationship." Sierra used force with her fingers, causing Anaxi to roll her eyes and pinch her hand desperately. "What do you have to argue with me? Your IQ was only used last night from beginning to end, but it did succeed in irritating me." She didn't care about the stinging pain of her nails scratching her arm, and only said, I just want to tell your system that if you are intelligent, you will find a way to send me back to my own place quickly, otherwise we will officially declare war." Sierra stared directly at Anaxi's wandering eyes, as if she was looking at another person through her. She smiled and threatened, "I will turn this world upside down, such as killing the heroine, or pulling the fate of the three male protagonists off the track they should have taken. I will make them live completely different lives. Your life will completely fall apart." After dressing up as the evil girl in the second game, I opened my eyes and found myself in the Sure. Author, Mei Guicheng. Chapter 186. Now I also understand that the meaning of the strategy no longer exists. Sierra curled her lips and smiled, "Not only me, but you as a system have no need to exist. At worst, everyone will die together. The core setting of the entire world is an Otome game. As the protagonist, Anaxi attacks three non-human creatures, and the system is born as a plug-in. Once the Otome setting collapses, the protagonists all have different directions, the core worldview no longer exists, and the system will perish. If it is smart, it should understand what she means." Sierra was very angry at what Anaxi did, but even though she was disgusted, she couldn't do anything to her at the moment. A piece of garbled code popped up on the screen in front of an 11's eyes, and finally formed a sentence. "Kill Sierra and clear the bug." It was the same as before, but under Sierra's pressure, she felt a little more timid. The letter to the church was actually not her idea. It was an opinion given by the system suddenly one day, just as she had obtained the venom from the vampire named Jeremy with the intention of killing her. The system existed in her mind, for the first time like a living thing, giving the most perfect advice only to let her murder Sierra. When I attacked the three men before, it never showed specific suggestions. The relationship between the system and Sierra seems to be clearer than her client. Anaxi suddenly said, "I didn't do it. That's it. We all want you to get out of my house and stay away from us." Sierra smiled, her eyes full of sarcasm. "I have to say, your casting is the most rubbish I have ever seen." She let go of an sigh and got out of bed. The servant just opened the door with the spare key and broke in. Several people squeezed into the small bedroom, and it suddenly became overcrowded. Josie looked at the bed full of water, and Anaxi's neck was red when she was lying on it. "Are you crazy so early in the morning that you want to murder my daughter?" She was so angry that without saying a word, she picked up the vase on the bedside and threw it at Sierra. Wow! She didn't throw it very accurately. The vase only broke in front of Sierra's toes, which didn't scare her at all. Rosehill walked up the stairs and saw Josie reaching out to hit someone. The frail girl was standing alone among a group of fierce people, trying not to hide. "Master Lizzie." His cane knocked on the door just in time, halting all movement for an instant. Everyone turned around, and Sierra also looked at him intently. Rosehill was wearing a light-colored three-piece suit, with his hands folded up and down and a black cane on his hands. The ruby on the tail ring was low-key and luxurious. There was some unspeakable disgust in his expression, and he seemed to be very repelled by this messy environment. Josie's eyes rolled on Sierra, her raised hand quickly lowered, and she hid it behind her back. Anaxi, whose upper body was soaked, covered her body with a quilt and stared at the elegant gentleman with a pair of pitiful eyes. "Mr. Rosehill, why did you come upstairs without saying hello?" Lizzie coughed lightly, trying to cover up the embarrassment in the house. "The door is open and there is no one in the house. If you hear a noise upstairs, come up and take a look." Rosehill touched the ground with her cane, elegantly walked around the debris on the floor and stood in front of Sierra. He looked her over from beginning to end, frowned, and was about to speak, but Sierra immediately interrupted him. "I'm going to wash up. It's really rude to receive guests in a nightgown. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After dressing up as the evil girl in the second game, I opened my eyes and found myself in the Sure. Author, Mei Guicheng. Chapter 187. Half a quarter of an hour later, the whole family was seated in the living room, except for Anashi, who had a swollen face and needed medical treatment. Rosehill's intention was very clear. He proposed to buy the Mawson Manor. Since there were many damaged and aging parts of the manor, he was only willing to buy it at a low price. "I'm afraid the price isn't right." Lizzie looked embarrassed. "It's at least twice what you bid." "Then we can't continue talking," Rosehill said coldly. "No one cares about your manor, and no one will take it over except me." Chiao 11 forced a smile and said, "Can I ask a little more, sir? What is your purpose in buying this manor?" Sierra also looked at him with a curious look. She really wanted to know what he would use it for, and he didn't lack a house to live in. Rosehill also looked at her and raised her lips slightly. "Sella will be 19 soon. This is her birthday present." Sierra was stunned for a moment. "Send it to me." 19 years old. He said, "On my way back, the cruise ship stopped around Leicestershire and went to the place where you lived. It was your butler who told me the date." She herself didn't even know that she was about to turn 19, or that in all her years of living, she had never had a birthday. Sierra quickly interrupted her thoughts that were inconsistent with her character. "It's very valuable, but you have already given me the gem." Speaking of the ruby called Eternity, Rosehill glanced at her delicate neck, which was empty. He lowered his eyes and pressed his eyebrows downward. "So you don't want it?" Lizzie directly stopped Sierra and helped her make a decision. "Sierra wants it? If Mr. Rosehill wants to buy it as a gift to Sierra, then of course I am willing to sell it at a low price." His decisive agreement was very simple. Sarah's manor was his manor, which was no different from being stuffed with a large sum of money to live back there. Josie also didn't like staying in this small place and living with a group of poor civilians. She rarely made a loving expression and echoed, "Sierra, let's go for a walk with Mr. Rosehill. The weather outside is very good. Go and bask in the sun. The sun is really bright outside the window, which is not good." Sierra's eyes were a little more worried, but Rosehill stood up and said calmly, "Let's go, Miss Sierra." Just as she was about to straighten her skirt and stand up on the armrest, a pale hand stretched out in front of her eyes, with the palm facing upward, and no lines could be seen. Sierra took his hand and stood up, her cold palm firmly wrapped around her hand. But Rosehill soon let go, and the two walked to the door side by side, and Aldine handed over a black umbrella. The umbrella opened up and shrouded the man in shadow. He held the umbrella in one hand and a black cane in the other, signaling, "Hold me." Sierra held his arm and walked slowly into the sunshine with him. She raised her head and said, "Does it feel uncomfortable? The sun is very bright today." "Aldine said you were injured last night." Rosehill accommodated her pace and walked slowly. "Well, Eric's identity was discovered by people from the church, and they wanted to kill him." Sierra didn't lie to him, and told the truth. "I was shot, and it was Lucid who helped save me. I told you to stay away from that stinky wolf, but you just didn't listen to me." Rosehill stopped and looked unhappy. "How is the wound?" "It's healed. I think it's just a little anemic now." She looked at his gloomy face and reached out to touch his chin. "Don't worry, Mr. Rosehill." He stopped and didn't pay attention to her unreasonable behavior. There was anger in his eyes. "You should stay by my side. No one can protect you except me." It has become his obsession to become one of him, gain a strong body and eternal life, and let her completely peel off her fragile body. Sierra ignored his words and pointed to the pastry seller in front. "I want to eat scones, grape-flavored." While Rosehill was angry, he went to buy her grape-flavored scones with a cold face. The pastry seller was startled by his cannibalistic expression. After getting the scones, Sierra took him to swim in the lake. "I have never swam on the lake with a man. Mr. Rosehill, you are the first." I am very honored. You can say that. She stepped into the rickety boat and Rosehill held her steady until she sat down. Both of them were sitting on the same side, hiding under a big black umbrella. They were completely different from the ladies holding floral parasols on the boat in the distance, and even a little funny. When the boat rowed out, Sierra laughed for a long time at the incompatibility between the two. Rosehill said, "Eric has been found, following the rules, and he will be leaving Cambodia soon." He spoke without much gloating, just stating a fact. Sierra nodded. "Well, his tribe thought I was the snitch, but they let me go." "Are you snitching?" Rosehill snorted, mocking others without politeness. "You don't have the guts to do this." "Why are you so sure?" Sierra pouted angrily. "Remember the first time you saw me on the boat?" He lowered his eyes, with a smile on his lips. "It was like seeing a ghost." Sierra recalled her first meeting with him. After thinking about it, she was scared to death of him. She snorted softly, "That's all." "Enough." Rosehill stared at her. "I sometimes doubt, and then you know what I am." Sierra's heart skipped a beat and she avoided his penetrating eyes. "Your illusion." He looked away, not paying attention to the change in her expression. "It doesn't matter to me anymore. I will take you back to the capital during the social season." Sierra turned her face sideways. "Do I still want to go? My family is already bankrupt, and it would be a joke to go to the social season again." "Who said anything about them?" He lowered his eyes and said, "Only you." My need and possession of you are far more than what you said." He bared his teeth, his dark eyes suddenly burning, and the emotion inside them was extremely rich. "I don't want to leave you for a long time. You must always be under my sight." His shoulders tilted towards her, and he moved his face closer. The faint blue-gray shadow under his eyes made the emotion even more intense. "But you always seem to be leading me wrongly, making me underestimate this emotion." Sierra tightened her grip on the paper bag of scones and swallowed. "Do I? That's just my opinion of you." Rosehill put on a smile as gentle as possible, and her scarlet lips lowered the temperature brought by the smile. "Obviously you don't know me well enough. Let me tell you a reason. The church that hurts you is controlled by Leader Bellamy. And it only took me one night to kill him." Sierra was stunned. She suspected that there was something wrong with her ears. "You killed the church leader? Is he crazy?" "After dressing up as the evil girl in the second game, I opened my eyes and found myself in the Sure." Author, Mei Cheng. Chapter 188. The arrogant vampire raised the corners of his lips wantonly, declaring his omnipotence. "I am different from your suitors. I only like to solve the problem from the root cause. There is always a price to pay for my help. I only like equal equality exchange of chips, with the exception of you. I've spoken about this more than once. Like," he chewed on these two words and said, "if you just like it, it's not enough for me to take this step. Rosehill is so smart that even an old man who has lived for centuries cannot fool him at all." Sierra lowered her head, silently opened her paper bag of scones, and tried to avoid the topic. "I'm hungry." The freshly baked pastry still had cream sandwiched in the middle. She took a bite into the middle, and the cream squeezed out from the side immediately rubbed her face. She used her tongue to hook it, but found that she couldn't lick it, so she tried to wipe it with her hand. Rosehill pressed her hand and said, "I'm hungry too." Sierra cleverly shrank her neck subconsciously. "There is no food for you here." Before she could finish her words, a cold kiss fell on her lips, helping her clean up the cream. The scones fell back into the paper bag, and a big black umbrella covered their faces. Aldine rowed the boat with one hand and held the umbrella with the other, and sighed in frustration. Why did he have to be publicly executed every time? Those little kissing sounds were simply too painful to his ears. Sierra was seduced by Rosehill and kissed again and again until her stomach made a loud noise and she was really hungry, so she was allowed to continue eating the scone. The battered lips were numb, and the sweet scones became difficult to chew in the mouth. Syrah didn't know that Rosehill would have such an impulse. When she learned that she was injured, her first thought was not to come and visit, but to directly solve the problem of the person who raised the problem. Anna 11's name flashed across her mind, and then she quickly erased it. We can't let anyone die now. After the kiss, Rosehill's attitude became much gentler. Why don't you wear a necklace? It's too expensive. I'm afraid of being robbed while walking on the road. Syrah compared the size of the gem. It's so eye-catching. I'd be heartbroken if I lost it. Where did you put it? I have treasured it and locked it in the cabinet of the dressing table, Sierra said solemnly. I will wear it on important occasions. Only then did Rosehill feel satisfied. You bought that villa because you wanted to solve my family troubles. Sierra finally had time to ask him about it. No, it's just for you to live in, he said disgustedly. It's so crowded that I can't even put a foot in there. This metaphor is somewhat exaggerated. Sierra coughed lightly and asked tentatively, do you want to live with me? Rosehill heard her voice, and her smile turned terrifying. You look like you really don't want this to happen. She pursed her lips and said, no. I won't live with you. He spoke quickly. You know it's hard not to eat a sweet lamb if you put it in your mouth every day. Sierra was relieved and praised him with a smile. I know Mr. Rosehill has always been a perfect gentleman and pursuer. Suitor, Rosehill pressed her hand on the wooden seat and sneered, when did our identities start to be reversed? Sierra thought for a while and answered with a smile, since you fell in love with me. His expression froze, his body straightened up, and his voice became unexpectedly sharp. Are you sure? She was a little surprised by his sudden outburst of emotion. Do you want me to change my words and go back to my original point of view? After dressing up as the evil girl in the second game, I opened my eyes and found myself in the Sure. Author, Mei Cheng. Chapter 189. The transfer procedures for Mawson Manor were completed, and Lizzie used the large sum to pay off all debts, leaving a remaining deposit of hundreds of thousands of gold coins. The whole family began to wait eagerly for Syrah to speak and move back to the manor together. On this weekend, she called a few workers from outside to come back and pack her luggage. Xiao 11 thought she was going back to live, so she was so excited that she started asking others to pack her luggage. After everything at home was almost packed, Sierra only asked the workers to carry her luggage to the car. When several servants wanted to put the luggage of Xiao 11 and others into the car, Sierra blocked the exit. What are you doing? Let's go home together. Xiao 11 opened a small parasol and observed her faint expression for a few seconds. Then she tightened her fingers on the umbrella handle and said in a sharp tone, don't you plan to take your family home? Go back. Sierra looked at her steadily for a few seconds and smiled. Ms. Josie, you and my father are not part of my family until you are married. Josie's heart suddenly rose. What do you mean? You want to drive me away? It means, I never think of you as my family, and of course we can't live together. She straightened her back, her eyes calm and distant. My only family is my mother, Clemens, and father, Lizzie. Sella, shut up. You are acting impolitely. We are a family. Of course we must live together. Lizzie came out with Anashi's arm, her face flushed and her eyes stern. Dad, I may have forgotten to tell you that the owner of Mawson Manor is Mr. Rosehill. I only have full control of the house. Sierra took a step back and got into the car, looked at the family from the car window, and said calmly, I only have the right to control who can live there. Lizzie was shocked, Anashi was shocked, and even Josie looked heartbroken. As if he was talking in his sleep, he muttered incredulously, but you already agreed that day that Mr. Rosehill would buy the manor and give it to you. He had a good idea. As a father, he always has the right to control his daughter's property. Once the manor is returned to Syrah's name, he has the right to use it. But of course he could think of Syrah, who told Rosehill not to completely transfer the manor to her name when they got back from the cruise that day. The current situation can only be regarded as her living in an unused house in Rose Hill. Obviously not, but Dad, you can choose to live here with Mrs. Josie and Anna, or you can choose to bring your luggage and go home with me. She once again threw the choice to Lizzie, and the ending was also predictable. You go. Lizzie, who was only responsible for providing a wife, could not leave behind his lover and children who had been with him for decades. With hundreds of thousands of gold coins and property, he could take them to a better place to live. Goodbye, Dad. Sarah glanced at Anasi, whose skirt was about to be torn, and waved to her with a smile, her expression as bad as she wanted. In the past, she had always been on guard against her harming herself, but since the confrontation with her system that day, she wanted to try the second way. The game character usually terminates everything by dying, and the operator can choose not to play or to try again. As a player, if she is killed, the game is over, and returning to reality becomes reasonable and followable. She began to look forward to how Anasi would kill her next, and hoped that the system would give her some good ideas. After putting all the luggage back into the manor, there was a row of new servants standing inside, which Rose Hill had prepared for her. I believe he will be a frequent visitor here in the future. While it was still early, Sierra took a car to the hospital. When passing by Gail's butcher shop, it was still open for business as usual, and she saw Gail's busy figure inside. She bought a fruit basket and carried it into the hospital. Greenie was sitting on the hospital bed, lowering her head to draw in a notebook, with no one around. Sierra pushed the door open and went in. The other party looked up and saw her with surprised eyes. Sierra. Are you okay? She put the fruit basket on the bedside table next to her and sat down by the bed. Greenie nodded, put away the brush, lowered her head and touched her belly. He is very strong, and I am very lucky. She looked happy to have survived the disaster, and her look made her feel even more guilty. Feel sorry. Sierra smiled awkwardly and intertwined her fingers on her thigh. I almost caused you to lose your child. Sella, look. The woman on the hospital bed showed the painting to her. On the white paper was a very skillful simple drawing of their big family. Greenie pointed to one of the boys. Eric inherited Robinson's good genes, and he transformed early and became the strongest among us. The black lines intertwined with the white background perfectly outline the boy's masculine and handsome demeanor and strong body. Eric in the painting is smiling happily, with his arms stretched out into a blank space. I haven't drawn it here yet. Greenie clicked on the blank space, where there were only a few vague outlines. Sierra asked softly, what are you going to draw? You. Greenie tilted her head to look at her. We always thought that you and Eric would get together, so we accepted you generously. Sierra pursed her lips, but lowered her eyes sincerely to apologize. I failed to live up to your expectations. I don't understand why you're apologizing. Her words stunned Sierra, who was ready to be criticized. She raised her eyes and blinked in surprise. Shouldn't I apologize? Although Galem and the others all said that you leaked our secret, I don't believe it. Greenie took the painting, as if she had a ready-made reference, and started to write on her face. You don't believe it? I'm the only one who can do this and leak the truth, Sierra said very seriously, and this eagerness to admit her mistakes made the woman on the bed curl her lips and smile. Really, it seems to me that you only admitted this mistake in order to leave Eric. She saw it so accurately that she was speechless at once, but she adjusted quickly. The unrealistic answer is, I have many ways to leave him, I don't have to choose the most extreme one. Greenie outlined her shallow facial features with a pen, with a serious expression. If you had the idea of informing the church from the beginning, you would have a lot of time to tell them, such as the day you first learned the secret. Correspondents reported us, but you didn't. She added, not to mention that you can still come and visit me now. If you are our enemy, you should be afraid of what you are doing. You know it is easy for us to kill a human being. So you must be covering up someone. It's very obvious. Eric is still young, but he is very smart and will find out soon. Sierra looked down at the face that was gradually taking shape in the picture. It was herself with a smile on her face, nestled in Eric's arms. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After dressing up as the evil girl in the second game, I opened my eyes and found myself in the Sure. Author, Mei Guicheng. Chapter 190. No matter what the truth is, you will get out of here. Greenie nodded, but it was because of the mermaid that night, the mermaid who saved you, that you decided to abandon Eric. I didn't abandon him, Sierra said quickly. I believe I like him more than anyone else, but we can't be together. You got into a troubled threesome, Greenie asked. Sierra smiled bitterly. More than that. In short, Eric leaving me and starting a new life is the best choice for him as a young man. She stood up, took out an apple from the fruit basket, peeled it and handed it to her. I don't want you to tell Eric not to do anything, Greenie. A simple family portrait was also drawn, and each character was lifelike. Grace took the apple with one hand and handed the painting to her with the other. I'll give this to you as a souvenir. I don't know what made you do this, but I sincerely treat you as a companion, and I respect your choice. Sarah took the painting and asked again before leaving, when did the doctor say you can be discharged from the hospital? Greenie rolled her eyes slightly. I want to stay for a month. Moving is cumbersome and the journey is long. I want to wait until the child is stable before leaving. At that time, it was almost the day when she went to the capital to participate in the social season. Sierra nodded, turned, and left. It rained a little when we came out of the hospital. Gale came over with an insulated lunchbox and bumped into her. He stopped, his body a little wet from the rain, and said warily, "Are you coming to visit Greenie?" Well, I didn't do anything but visit. Sierra nodded her chin slightly. Before we leave, Wally, I hope you stay away from Eric and us, Gale said in a deep voice. I will transfer the entire butcher shop to you. Sierra nodded. I understand. She didn't bring an umbrella when she went out, so she walked into the drizzle and disappeared from Gale's sight. Returning to the manor wet, the new servants came to greet him. Mr. Rosehill is here. She pushed open the glass door and walked into the living room. The crystal chandelier was polished so brightly that the light made her close her eyes. Are there new light bulbs up there? Yes, miss, the front one is old. Sir, he ordered workers to come here to renovate it. There are still many water pipes that have not been repaired. It will take some time. The servant poured her a cup of hot tea, turned around and left. Where have you been? To make yourself like this? Rosehill frowned, realizing that as long as his eyes left her for a moment, she could always make something wrong with herself. The man who was sitting on the sofa a second ago was standing in front of her in the blink of an eye, lifting a strand of her wet hair. It smells bad again. Are you going to see the werewolf? He asked, dissatisfied. I just went to meet Greenie and her husband. Sierra grabbed the hair from his hand and looked up at him. Why are you here today? To celebrate me moving into my new house. The master is here to see if you have any needs. Aldine, acting as an invisible man, stood in the corner. When you were not at home, he took the initiative to repair some broken furniture. Thank you. Will you stay for dinner tonight? Sierra raised her head and asked. He lowered his eyes and said softly, do you have food to offer me? Yes. Sierra pointed to her chest, a plate of delicious lamb. Rosehill stared at where her fingertips were pointing, a large piece of exposed skin, with a faint arc hidden behind the translucent lace. After dressing up as the evil girl in the second game, I opened my eyes and found myself in the Sure. Author, Mei Guicheng. Chapter 191. His throat suddenly rolled, he turned his back and said in a suppressed voice, go and change your clothes. Sierra chuckled lightly, wait for me for a while. Just because she knew he was the only one who wouldn't mess around, she felt confident. Not only did she understand this, but Rosehill, who was standing in the living room downstairs, also understood it. He never likes others to provoke him. After hurriedly rinsing her body and drying her hair, Sierra opened the door and walked out when someone grabbed her waist and pushed her against the wall. The exclamation was blocked in her throat before she could even leave her mouth, and Rosehill's breath came over her, completely occupying her. His breathing was cold and rapid, biting her lower lip to block any screams she might make. Those suddenly widened, frightened brown eyes were full of his face, and Rosehill was very satisfied. Sierra's waist was firmly controlled by two big hands, and he easily placed her on the small table next to the wall. The vase on it was swept to the ground with one hand, making a shattering sound. This height was just right when he leaned over. After the girl got used to it, his fingertips touched the zipper of her skirt on the back and pulled down most of it. The cold palms passed through the open back clothes and touched her warm skin. Sierra shuddered suddenly and shuddered. Just touching the skin on her back was enough to make Rosehill lose control. With his dark eyes full of passion, he completely pulled the zipper to the end and peeled the clothes off her shoulders from behind. His bare shoulders were touched by his body, filled with coldness. Sierra had no choice but to bite him hard on the lip. Rosehill. Her voice was aggrieved, and she sounded like she was about to cry after being bullied. The noble vampire immediately stopped moving and leaned his head on her shoulder. His fangs gently rubbed her shoulder as if in demonstration, causing goosebumps to instantly appear on the skin. "Do you still dare to seduce me?" His voice was hoarse, and he kissed her shoulder repeatedly, like a hunter looking for a suitable position, ready to take a bite at any time. "I don't dare anymore." Sierra grabbed Rosehill's messy blonde hair, fearing that he would really bite her hard. Fortunately, he just leaned on her shoulder for a while, slowly adjusted and straightened up. The vampire, who was supposed to have neatly ironed suits, became a mess, with broken hair falling on her forehead, her collar open, and two buttons of her shirt inside were ripped off in a fit of passion, revealing a piece of porcelain white skin. He was in such a mess, but Sierra suddenly saw an aristocratic aura that was seductive and seductive. She blushed and tried to pull up her skirt with her backhand, but was stared at by a pair of cannibalistic eyes. Her trembling hands couldn't pull it back, so she had to jump off the table and turned her back to him and complained, "Pull it up for me." With angry instructions, Rosehill curled her lips and pressed the zipper all the way with her fingertips to slowly pull it up for her. As the fingertips touched, a shiver ran down the tailbone. Sierra bit her lower lip restrainedly and swallowed hard the discordant sound that rolled up her throat. The two stayed in the bedroom for a long time before letting the servant come in and put away the vase. The dinner in the kitchen was almost done. Rosehill didn't eat anything. There was only a glass of red wine in front of her, and she took a sip from time to time, her eyes never leaving Sierra, who was eating meat. "Are you staying here tonight?" She started looking for a topic. "No," he quickly objected and frowned in disgust, "all the rooms need to be cleaned." "Do you want to keep the things in the master bedroom?" "Just throw them away if they are not needed." It was the smell of strangers, and he didn't want to step foot in it except her room. Thinking of Lizzie's bedroom and Anashi's, Sierra decided to throw away all the things tomorrow. After finally getting through dinner, Rosehill sat for a while before getting ready to leave. She was still a little surprised to think that he really just came to see her move into her new house today. Near 11 o'clock in the evening, a soldier suddenly visited her manor. It was already midnight, and Sierra was woken up from bed by a servant. She came down sleepily wearing a robe. The man stood at the door, dressed in military uniform, and claimed to be Eric's partner. "I know it's abrupt to visit late at night, but Miss Sarah, can you go and see him? He has been drinking in the bar for 2 days. He is in really bad condition and refuses to leave no matter how hard he tries." The young man, who was just beginning to have a love affair, got drunk one after another, and Sierra's guilt instantly rose. Wait. She went upstairs to change her clothes in a hurry, ran down and took his car to the bar. There were a lot of drunks on the road at night. As soon as the car arrived at the door of the bar, there were many staggering drunks rushing out, shouting, "Crazy! That's really crazy!" As soon as Sierra stepped into the bar, a bottle was swung down in front of her toes, smashing it into pieces, and the small broken glass cut her skin. The sharp stinging pain spread with the blood left behind. She didn't pay attention, only looking for a familiar figure in the ambiguous light. The sound of physical fighting was not far away. On the stage that was supposed to be for people to play the piano and sing, the piano was broken in the middle like a scrap, and a person fell inside. Jem sat on Eric's body and punched him again. "Eric! Are you awake?" Sierra took a breath and ran over immediately. "Jem! Eric! Stop fighting!" The girl's voice faintly entered his ears, and then a blurry little face appeared in Eric's sight. He could hear his own heavy breathing, and heard the familiar voice calling him anxiously over and over again. "It's crazy. Even if you get yourself drunk, you can see her." Eric bent his arms to cover his eyes. His nose was bleeding, and his body was covered with wounds from the fight. He was in a miserable state. Seeing her coming, Jem quickly stopped his hand and stood aside, breathing heavily. "Stop torturing him, Sierra, tell him clearly, don't let things become irreversible." He still left Eric with Sierra and left over the broken wine bottles on the ground. Sierra bit her lip and squatted down next to the embarrassed boy. "Eric." She grabbed his hand hanging on one side and squeezed it slowly. "Look at me. Eric." He finally moved away the arm covering his eyelids, and his eyes fell on her worried face, which slowly became clearer. The strong body suddenly sat up from the ruins, causing the broken piano to become even more broken. "Sierra." He jerked his hand away and held her injured ankle instead. "You are hurt." This movement made Sierra almost sit on the ground. She quickly comforted Eric. "No, just a little scratch." He was obviously very drunk, but he picked her up immediately. "I'll take you to deal with it." His steps were very unsteady, and he was trying to hold her to steady his body, and he smelled of alcohol. Sierra hugged his neck tightly and pressed her face against his neck. "Eric, can we go home?"